I want to welcome everybody to the meeting. Just to let everybody know, we'll start in about 20 seconds so everybody can find some seats and settle in and check to see if your wine's refilled. So, welcome to the annual meeting. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Michael Banbury. I'm on the board and I live on Perry Ridge. And, we do this every year. This year has been a great year at River Valley Ranch, as many of you probably know. Great weather, lots of good activities, some new houses and new neighbors and new families and lots of people at the pool. So it's been a lot of fun to watch all of that happen. We do have a pretty straightforward agenda for tonight. As we have done in the past, we'll try to move through this, give you some quantity of information, and then have a really robust question and answer session at the end. It's difficult to answer questions along the way because you get off track and before you know it, 2 hours have gone by. So we'll try to do that. If you can remember your questions, we'll make sure that we finish quickly enough that everybody's still here and has a chance to participate. The next part of the program is going to be Ashley, who many of you know or should know. He's our general manager and is mostly in charge of everything operationally that goes on around here. And he's going to talk about the two subjects that you see up there. All right, Ashley.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Mike. So there are a lot of topics that I'd like to talk about today, but I want to start with something that might seem obligatory, right, that I should bring up. But, it's definitely, I guess I can't say just how near and dear it is to my heart all the same. And that's just a thank you to the RVR staff. And not just the folks that you see on this slide, but also all the folks that stand behind them, right? There's a lot of people that take care of the services here in this amazing community every single day. So a big thanks to all of them. So I'd like to start tonight with some good news, right off the bat, maybe the easiest thing that I have to talk about, and that's finance. So the slide you see just behind me on both sides is our year-to-date performance. So it's our performance through June. So as of June, we're around $1,500 ahead of the budget. So we have a surplus of $1,500, which is basically flat to the budget. It's pretty darn close. As we do every year, we budget to $0 by year end, right? And we do see ourselves, forecasting toward a strong finish, maybe a small surplus. Hopefully worst case scenario, we're at zero by the time we get to year end. Those of you with really good eyesight, I don't know who can see the numbers on the slides behind me, but we'll notice that income is slightly behind this year. It's behind as a percentage, it's really nominal. It's less than 1%. It's about $11,000. That's largely due to lagging home sales in RVR. I shouldn't say lagging. We just made, maybe the wrong projection by a small amount. Perhaps by year end, that number will be back to normal, but at the moment it's $11,000 short. But you'll see that our team correspondingly shaved $16,000 off of the expense line to make up for that shortfall. So that's how we arrive at the $1,500 surplus. So, I won't belabor this point, but I just would like to make the point that being on budget doesn't just happen by accident, right? It does take a lot of work. We have really simple financial goals. The first financial goal is just to budget carefully. So we're going to start budgeting carefully within the next month. We're going to start tidying up our year-end forecast to be sure that we've got a really good idea of what those month-to-month expenditures look like. So we have a great baseline that we can build the 2026 budget off of that we'll then present to the board. So we really do try to get that right. And the other thing that we do is that we meet with those who spend the money. We meet with them regularly, right? Because you can't be successful if you don't know what your budget is. So we meet with Allie and we meet with Travis and we talk about the tree budget and what work we have coming up and what work we need to get done. And we prioritize that on a month-by-month basis. And that really is what helps guide us into a $0 budget by year end or to a surplus, which we've come back with a surplus so far every year. Hopefully we can do the same this year. So anyway, a big thank you to the team for just really keeping a close eye on those numbers. So now I just want to move on and talk about the ranch house renovation. I feel like that's what a lot of you here tonight would love to hear about. So let me first start talking about what upcoming, when I say upcoming renovations, what I mean by upcoming. It really is right around the corner. So, we've planned from the start to start on Labor Day of this year. And we still plan to start on Labor Day of this year. So we really are right on target. In fact, we're hoping to start 1 week before Labor Day. We're hoping to start on the 25th of August with demo on the renovations. So right on schedule, right? We went through the design phases with our architect, which is Land and Shelter, and our general contractor, who is R.A. Nelson. And we applied for a permit with the town months ago, once again, right on schedule, right? So we're just waiting to hear back from the town. I was just talking with Jason before we got started, who's here tonight. He's the president of R.A. Nelson. And we do have a demo permit. So even if the permit came in late, we still have the option to just go ahead and get a head start and start that demo. So we're in good shape. And the renovation is going to take place in 2 phases. I hope you guys got to see the boards that were outside at the reception. They have a lot of great information. Thanks to Land and Shelter for putting those together. The yellow on the slide behind me, or the yellowish color, is phase 1, and the purple-ish color is phase 2. So phase 1 is going to take place starting, the 25th of next month, and it's going to occur this fall, this winter, and this spring. And then phase 2 is going to take place the next corresponding fall, winter, spring, right? So we're going to stop, be open for the summer, and then we're going to start again. And we phased the schedule for 3 reasons. We phased the schedule that way, number one, to stay flexible, right? We want to be able to move things around, and we want to be sure that we finish on time. That's actually 1 and 2 reasons, right? Finishing on time. And it helps us with liquidity. But I'll go back to the finishing on time point. Finishing before we come to Labor Day is a high priority for us. And I can assure you it's also a high priority for R.A. Nelson as well. It's written into the contract, that all services will be complete on the recreational pool by the time we get to Memorial Day, because we do want to be sure that the ranch house, we understand it's a community asset, and we want it open, particularly for the summer season. We want to limit the closure as much as possible, but we really want it open for that summer season. So let me talk about what exactly we hope to accomplish this fall, winter, and spring. So you can expect to see a new pool deck outside. The pool deck that we have right now is a stamped concrete finished pool deck, and it served its purpose for a long time. But at this stage, there's nothing left, right? It just can't be repaired. So the whole thing has to be torn up and completely replaced. And we plan to replace it with a sand finish, integrated color, concrete pool deck, right? Which we believe is not only going to be beautiful, but it's also going to stand the test of time. It's going to look great for years to come. The pools are going to be replastered. Again, this is all in phase 1. The pools are going to be replastered with new tile and new coping. Coping are those stones that you see that define the bodies of water themselves. And we'll have built-in shade umbrellas. We're going to have 2 new built-in shade umbrellas in addition to the 2 existing. So we're going to have a lot more shade out on the pool deck, and new full pool furniture, which I know some of you are really excited about. And we're also going to renovate the mailroom. We're getting a lot done in phase 1, right? We're also going to tackle the mailroom. We're going to replace the roof on the ranch house. We have to replace the roof on the ranch house if we want to keep our insurance. And we're going to add that East Wing addition, which I think we're all familiar with, but it's on the other side of the fireplace of the great room. That's going to add a couple family changing rooms. And it's also going to add a really nice covered patio, as you can see in the picture behind me, just off the pool deck. So the remainder of the renovation is going to take place, right, that next fall, winter, spring of 2026 and 2027. I mean, that's going to include, the soft renovations of the ranch house, all the painting that's going to happen within the great room, new lighting going into the great room, a locker room renovation that I believe we're sorely overdue for. That I'm super excited about. So all of that is going to take place within that second phase of renovation. So the whole thing takes about a year and a half in total to accomplish. Okay, so let's talk about the renovation costs, which we did discuss in last month's board meeting. We discussed this at length when the board authorized us to sign a construction contract with R.A. Nelson. They gave us the green light to move forward, and that construction contract has what's called a GMP. Does anyone want to guess as to what? No one on this side of the room? But anyone from this portion of the room want to guess what GMP might stand for? A, a great moo pool, maybe. But anyone else? Any guesses? I'm hearing some great guesses out there. A guaranteed maximum price, right? So I just want to emphasize that, right? Because the contract does have a guaranteed maximum price. So you're going to see numbers behind me on the next slide. And those numbers are all predicated on a guaranteed maximum price. So I'm going to start with the good news first. The good news is there's no second special assessment happening, right? That's the big news flash. That's not necessary in order to bring this package forward. And we've done a lot of financial work. I mean, I have analysis paralysis at this stage. We have worked through the spreadsheet and then reworked it and audited and re-audited. And thanks for all those who have helped with that, because a lot of folks have helped with that. But we believe there's a path forward. We think there's a path forward, which I'll kind of go through. So but here's the bottom line, right? We are slightly over budget on the special assessment portion of the project, right? So everything that we took the special assessment funds for and included within that, the monies that you paid, which totaled $3,047,000. We are over budget, but we're not catastrophically over budget on that line. And $300,000 of that overage is in contingency. So we're over by 645,000, 300,000 of which is a contingency that we're holding to be sure that we have enough money, right? Just to safeguard. So we are over, but it's not huge. The majority of the budget overage is really coming from the reserve fund or the reserve portion of the project. And most specifically, we're talking about the bodies of water, right? The pools. So reserve studies tend to get the really big picture, pretty accurate. So they can tell a large HOA like ourselves, you need to hold this much money in reserves, and you're going to have a really low corresponding chance of special assessment due to an emergency, right? They do a good job of that. Do they always get the minutia right? I don't know. Sometimes when you're in a large organization, you look at the reserve study inside of 5 years and, it's wow, $300,000. We're never going to do that, right? We're never going to spend that. That's ridiculous. $500,000 for that fence. That fence is, going to stand for another 15 years. So the minutia isn't always right, but they do get the big picture right. I mean, the reality is that the pool deck and the pool plastering was just more expensive than the reserve study estimated for those specific items, right? But I'll make an important point here. Those reserve study items, you guys, they have to get done no matter what, right? I mean, the roof is a wonderful example of a reserve study item. I mean, what do you do at your house if your roof starts leaking? You just have to replace the darn thing. You can't say, oh, I'm not going to replace it. It's too expensive. You have to replace it. So the pool deck is shot. It was wonderful. Heinz installed it. I'm sure it sold a lot of homes, but unfortunately, the only way to get rid of that pool deck is to jackhammer it up, and it just costs a lot of money. So that really is where the overage is coming from. But now I just want to show you a slide that, I mean, I guess I'd call this slide the good news, right? So through this process, we have rebuilt our reserve study. We rebuilt the reserve study on an Excel spreadsheet that has, I don't know, how many tabs do you think that thing has on it? 15, 20, a lot of tabs on it. And it's crazy. We rebuilt the entire reserve study. So we can see our reserve balances actually on a month by month basis. And R.A. Nelson even gave us a draw projection of when the expenses would hit on a month by month basis. We plugged all that data in. So the graph that you see behind me, another reminder, is based on a $500,000 contingency. So a $500,000 contingency is baked into those numbers as a safeguard. And R.A. Nelson is holding, somewhere around $200,000 in contingency as well, all baked into the numbers that you see. Our projections don't show the reserve balances falling below $1 million on any given year, right? So always above $1 million at any year end. It also shows our reserve balance rebounding relatively quickly over time. And I will make the point that these numbers are not predicated on massive increases to your reserve dues, right? They're predicated on numbers of pretty tame increases to reserve dues. That's up to the board every year. They have to make that decision on how they want to fund reserves. But I'm just telling you, we didn't have to jack up your reserve funds by or certainly nothing that you haven't seen over the last 3 years. So I'll also note, and I think that this is important, that in going through this process, we understand the reserve study better than we've ever understood the reserve study. So we know where the risks are. And in many cases, we have quotes for those risks. And by risks, I mean, what happens if 2 pump houses fail on the golf course, which we're responsible for, like 50% of the cost, right? Those are crazy expensive pump houses. What happens if that happens? We know. Like we actually worked with the golf course and we had quotes done on that. And we have it within our reserve study, not for next year, right? We have it planned in our reserve study, but we have it planned with inflation within our reserve study. So all the big ticket items that could go wrong, we're aware of, and we know roughly how expensive they are going to be. And that gives us even more confidence that a floor of 1 million or above $1 million inside of our reserve fund in any given year just is not a dangerous place to be. And the board agreed with us on that, right? Because we gave a presentation that was frankly, more in depth than this presentation, which is on our website for anyone to look up and read the notes on and read about. We keep it on the main page of the website if you're ever interested. And we feature it in our newsletter to link to that as well. So they felt comfortable enough to allow us to sign that contract with R.A. Nelson. So, that's what I hope everyone walks away with as good news from tonight. We really do believe that we've got a great path forward on the project. I, for one, am excited. I'm excited to see about the great improvements at the ranch house. I think they look wonderful. And when you see the slide boards out there, I hope it gets you guys excited for what's coming as well. I'm sure there are some questions, and I'd be happy to I love questions, so be happy to take the questions in our Q&A. But I would ask that you guys just wait for the Q&A to ask those questions. But before I exit the podium, I do want to note that our contractor, R.A. Nelson, has really been a great partner with us. And they understand our priorities, as I've mentioned before. They really have been with us from the start throughout this process. So as we brought on Land and Shelter, we also had Jason and his team at R.A. Nelson on board. So the architect worked hand in hand with the GC. It wasn't a situation where we worked with an architect and then later brought a GC in and said, here are your plans, you're just stuck with them, right? So we tried to be as collaborative as we could through the process. And a big thanks to Land and Shelter, to Andy Korber, and to Taylor Higgins, who's with Land and Shelter as well. She's with us tonight. And thank you guys for coming out, and they are available. If you guys have any targeted questions for, the architect or the GC specifically, you can feel free to ask those, and you can feel free to ask me. And if you're too bashful to ask a question here and you want to ask it later on, then my office door is always open. I love talking about this stuff. I could probably talk about the renovation for another hour if you let me, but I think I'd put you all to sleep. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Leisure. who is going to tell you all about real estate and RVR and beyond through the Roaring Fork Valley. You like the picture of yourself up there?
Oh, I'm wearing the same shirt.
It's a different, maybe,
Pocket though, so it is a different shirt.
but
I think
maybe
our
the
shirt
same,
is blue though.
maybe the same pants.
Pants, yeah, probably is the pants, yeah. Wow. Speaker, we're gathered here today to, real estate, great in River Valley Ranch. I thought I'd start kind of with the state and work our way down to River Valley Ranch. Supply is up, affordability is a challenge right now. The supply in Colorado is up almost 23% of available homes. Some of that is being tied to the interest rates. Affordability has slowed sales. There are some areas, for instance, Summit County, the supply is up about 32%. The Eagle County inventory is up about 43%. As we come down to Carbondale, comparing to the rest of Carbondale proper, the average single-family home price in Carbondale is about flat from 2024, currently at about $2.33 million. But remember, that's single-family homes, and in some of the things I show up here, it is including everything in River Valley Ranch, so it's not exactly an apples-to-apples comparison there. So to divert a little bit from where I was going to go, because I forgot which order these were in. This is just, I thought it's interesting to see the history. And this only goes back to 2009, but this compares Iron Bridge, River Valley Ranch, and Aspen Glen. And this is average sales price. This is a 12-month rolling average, so it's kind of smoothing out the trends. But just amazing to see where we've come from in 2013. You look at where that green line bottoms out to where we are today. You know, our homes are almost 4 times the price that they were at one time. And that's the average. And we're building new homes. It's not an apples to apples comparison, but it's just a trend of how hard it is to get into these communities and get into the valley, because the whole valley really has shown this kind of appreciation. And this is that same graph based on average price per square foot between River Valley Ranch, Aspen Glen, and Iron Bridge. Yeah, we do track very closely with Aspen Glen. It's kind of interesting. Their average price was a little higher. The average square foot is very, very similar. Generally speaking, our homes might be a little bit smaller, and that's probably why our price per foot is a little closer than maybe the average sales price. We talked about the average single family home price in Carbondale is almost $2.33 million now. If we look at the supply in the Aspen Glenwood Springs MLS, we had 470 homes available June of last year. We currently have 822 available. So the supply is up in our valley also. The Aspen Glenwood Springs roughly covers the area from this side of the Grand Junction Canyon up through Aspen. And River Valley Ranch's supply has also increased. You know, in 2022, we might have had 3, 4, 5 homes on the market at one time. So when I get to where we are today, in River Valley Ranch, there's currently 15 homes available. So our supply is up also. But that said, we have 15 townhomes sold or under contract so far this year. In 2023 and 2024, we absorbed 30 residential properties. That does not include land. So we're going to be pretty close probably to 30. Remember, we've generally got to put these under contract by mid-November to get them closed within the year. So we might not quite get to 30 this year, which is reflecting the budget. That'll keep the numbers down a little bit on the transfer tax and the other things that feed the association. And then so far this year, as it says on the slide, our average price year to date is just over $2.6 million. The average price for the year of 2024 was 2.54 roughly. So we're up over 100,000, almost 100,000 on our average sales price. And a lot of that's, it's still not surprising. It's interesting to me that the premium that is being put on new construction, and maybe that's because we do have some homes now that are starting to push 25 years, but we're seeing new construction close above $1,000 a foot, which, you know, I can remember when the average was probably around 200 a foot. And they're beautiful homes. So the average sold price per square foot so far this year is almost $850 a foot compared to the last year, which was about $700 a foot. So still robust market, but it is a little bit, you want to keep our eye on the supply because if things don't sell, it will get more competitive. And we've been in a long, hot market. On our home sites, we currently have 3 active home sites available, starting at 590,000. And we've closed 5 home sites so far this year. We closed 8 home sites last year in 2024. So on pace to do maybe about the same number. It is interesting that so far this year, our average home site sales price is about 680,000 compared to last year at 544. But I think we got to remember, one, we're dealing with a small sample size, 5 closed so far this year compared to 8. So those averages can move pretty quickly because there have been 2 sales on the southern bench up there that back to Sopris, and both those sales were in the 900,000s. Those are our 2 highest home sites ever, home site sale closings. That's all I have. We really appreciate all you guys. We hope that we will see you Saturday for our open house and party in the barn, our annual summer party in the barn. We will have 11 homes open from 3 to 5 on Saturday, and then we'll be here in the barn at 6 o'clock, and we hope to see all of you and your friends and anybody else that might have an interest in real estate in River Valley Ranch. Thank you, guys.
Well, first of all, Brian, thank you for letting us use the barn for the annual meeting again. Not just a real estate agent, but also homeowner and neighbor and good friend to a lot of people in the room. So I want to talk a little bit about what's titled transfer fees. But first, I want to remind you, we are all co-owners of River Valley Ranch Homeowners Association. We all own a piece of it. You don't get a stock certificate, but everybody in this room has an interest in what's going on. And that's why it's important for Ashley to tell you what he's doing with your money. And it's important for Brian to tell you what your biggest asset, your home, is probably roughly worth. And we try to be as open as possible about that because, it's hard to give away the control over your money. And, just want you to know that we take it very seriously. Talking about real estate and the transfer fees, I want to now tell you a story that some of you may know and many of you may not. When the developer and the town got together to come and put this whole production, there was an agreement that 0.25% of all real estate transfers would be assessed as a fee at closing. Whether you know it or not, every time there's a closing in RVR, 0.25% goes into an account, and according to our documents, because this is all very specifically written down, which is going to become important, goes into an account that's held by RVRMA. And in our original covenants, RVRMA was then required quarterly to distribute that money to an entity that was established called the Carbondale Agricultural Heritage Fund, that was specifically called to provide money to set aside for land concessions and conservation easements and things like that within 7 miles of Carbondale. Great idea. I think the town probably loved it and the developer probably thought it was a good idea too. But that was a long time ago. Things happen. We don't have great records of the whole thing. And the Carbondale Agricultural Heritage Fund was dissolved at some point. It's a little bit, and I'm not going to get into details, unclear what happened. And then sometime later, the Western Colorado Agricultural Heritage Fund was established, and they started taking the money. And that went on for a while. And then it merged with the Aspen Valley Land Trust. So right now, the way things have been working for a very long time is that after every closing, the title company sends that 0.25% to James at RVRMA, goes into a special account, and then every quarter we send a check to Aspen Valley Land Trust. Great, goes for good things. Coffin Ranch is probably paid in part by all of you or your predecessors for title transfers. Here comes the rub. So for better or for worse, we hired a guy named Ashley Lynch a while ago to be our general manager. And that officious fella started going through a lot of our documents, making sure that everything was in order. A number of the board members kind of got involved to make sure we're compliant because he's very good at this stuff. And it turns out there are a number of things that require some attention. And one of them is the transfer fee. Because our documents specifically say that the RVRMA must collect this money, hold it, and distribute it every quarter to the Carbondale Agricultural Heritage Fund. It doesn't say anything about AVLT. So technically, we are out of compliance. You're not allowed to do that in the state of Colorado. So the easiest way, and to make sure that we weren't missing anything, we hired outside counsel from Denver that specifically specializes in this very area. They looked through all the documents, did all the thing, gave us a little report about what to do. They said, just reconstitute the Carbondale Agricultural Heritage Fund. You'll have to appoint the board because in our documents, we're actually required to appoint at least 50% of the board members. I don't think AVLT is going to give us that latitude. So, although I will point out, there is one member of RVR that is a board member at AVLT. You can see it on the website if you want to look for his name. But, so that's where we are. So you're probably going to hear a little bit about this. I want to tell you from my personal perspective, it's not a money grab. Nobody's trying to switch the books around or do anything, that wouldn't be right. We don't get to keep the money. You can't stop the transfer fees from being collected because that would take the town of Carbondale to do that. And we can't spend it on RVR because that's not part of the very specific language used on what this money was going for, which is essentially for the good of the community within 7 miles of the town of Carbondale. So that's where we are. We're working closely with AVLT to kind of smooth this out going forward so that everybody knows what's going on. We will have to do this to be in compliance to reestablish the Carbondale Agricultural Heritage Fund. It's the easiest path forward. The other is to change our documents, which would require a giant election. And you guys may remember that we've had some elections lately, some ballot issues, not elections, like short-term rental and things like that, and they are problematic. So this is going to be an easy way to just get a pass-through organization that can just take care of this legally. That's what that is all about. A lot. Yeah. Because it wasn't very much when Brian was saying, when things got started in 1995, it wasn't very much, but now it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you're not required to spend it in any one year. So for instance, AVLT had been hanging on to that money for years. And then they eventually, used part of it to pay for the Kaufman Ranch, which is, in Carbondale, and that's great. They were involved in Red Hill. You don't see RVR on a lot of those labels, but actually your money or the money from your predecessor transactions went to pay for a lot of that, as well as some administrative fees. Hugh will get to you in the Q&A sessions. That's that. You'll hear more about it as we try to put this back together. I know Suzanne, a lot of people in the community know Suzanne. She's the CEO at AVLT, and they're a great ally. We need to work cooperatively with them for years to come because we'll have land issues in this valley, and we need their help. The town needs their help. So that's the story. If there's questions in the Q&A, happy to see what I can answer. But now you know. Okay. John's going to talk a little bit about other important initiatives in RVR. Want the handheld or this?
Jeff, are you coming up for this? Where's Jeff? Right here. Okay. Jeff, come on up here, please. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. It's great to see you all. Who likes living in Carbondale? Who thinks Carbondale is an awesome community that, you know, has it all over cooler places up valley, right? You know, what Jeff and I are here to talk to you about is not official RVR business. This is nothing that your dues are going to, but it's something that we think is important to our community here in Carbondale, and that is for those of us who are in RVR to reach out to the community. So Jeff and I have initiated a group called RVR for Good. There's a couple of dozen of us that have been meeting so far for the last couple of months, maybe half a year. And all it is learning about the nonprofits in our community, learning about how we might support them, learning about what kind of volunteer opportunities they may present for people. We're not, you know, out there asking people for donations necessarily, but we're trying to learn about this community and find ways to support it. Because I think we could all agree that we like Carbondale and we want it to stay the way it is, as opposed to being a place that, you know, no one can afford to live other than the people who can pay $3.5 million for a house. So this is our effort to do that. And it's a group you can join if you're interested anytime. There's no fee. You can be part of it. What we're trying to do is support local nonprofits, whether that's around education needs or food insecurity or arts or health services. And the number of nonprofits really just working right here in Carbondale is amazing, not to mention throughout the valley. We're trying to inform RVR about it. If you come to our monthly meetings, which you're welcome to do, we often have a nonprofit come and present. So you could hear about Sarah Gilbertson's involved with Great Expectations, which does prenatal care for people who can't afford it. And they came and they talked to us about Great Expectations. So that's the type of thing that's happening in those meetings. And ultimately, we're trying to connect this community with Carbondale as a whole. I mean, I hate to break it to you. We had a meeting with the mayor. We aren't necessarily considered part of Carbondale. Now, a lot of you are actually involved in these nonprofits, and I've learned a lot about that through doing this. But, you know, we're the people that live across the road in the place with the fancy houses. So you know, to kind of think about it from the perspective of the rest of Carbondale, we have a little work to do to have them feel like we're part of their community. So that's that. Here are some things we're doing. Stepping Stones is an after-school for at-risk after school for project. They have something like over half of all the kids in the Carbondale schools that have come in and been part of their thing. They're right over here by Benjin, Tokyo. And they have kids in there every afternoon. And what we are doing, Jeff and Michelle did it last month, Helen did it this month, is we're bringing food over once a month on Monday. And if you want to come help support Stepping Stones, that's something that we're doing. We are working with Carbondale Education Foundation, which has several people involved in it who are parents who live in RVR. Carbondale Education Foundation is supporting the public schools in Carbondale, finding money for them to do field trips and other things that teachers are not getting the money for. They funded a music teacher at the elementary school last year for a period of time. So that's the type of thing Carbondale Education Foundation is doing. By the way, they're also looking for volunteer teachers. So if you're interested, you have something you want to teach kids about, this is a place you can do that. They're also the beneficiaries of Cowboy Up, which is a fundraiser on August 22nd. And if you want to get your boots on and put your hat on and go down and work security or whatever it is you want to do during the Cowboy Up event, there's opportunities to do that. By the way, do you see there was a scan here for RVR for Good website? Pretty high tech, I know, but we have a website and all of this information about what's going on is available there. Just a couple more that we're doing. We're doing the Holiday Baskets program. I'm sure a lot of you participated in that last year. Ann Blackwell and Sarah Murr are doing a great job heading that up. The Crystal Theater is trying to go nonprofit and be supported and sustained as a theater downtown in our town. which is a special experience if you haven't done it, to go to a movie theater there and have popcorn.
Do you want me to mention something?
Please, Jeff.
Yeah, so, our wonderful single screen theater is, transitioning. So it's been around for about 40 years under great stewardship. But the owners of the theater are retired. And so, a woman from Carbondale, Kate Schorwin, has become the executive director of a nonprofit to effectively not just save the theater, which is part of the mission, but expand it significantly. So she is raising about $500,000 to do that, not just to enhance the movie-going experience, but expand the series of different events within that space. So there are, and I'm happy to speak to people about volunteer efforts and potential donation efforts, even though we're not soliciting donations. If you love the arts and what we have in the middle of Carbondale, that's a great organization to get involved in. I'd like to thank all of you that have been bringing food to the basket that's been at the ranch house for Lift Up. We are regularly taking a good load of food over to the pantry to help feed people, which is also another thing we've tried to support. And if you want to get in on this, you can come to the meetings and you can give us feedback and advice about what we're doing, which we would appreciate. You can volunteer on this website. I think you could even sell popcorn at Mountain Fair outside the Crystal Theater if you were interested, you know. So there's a lot of stuff like that. We are meeting every last Tuesday, and the meeting this time around happens to be a field trip. We're going over to the 3rd Street Center. Does anybody know where the 3rd Street Center is? Okay, there's a couple dozen different nonprofits operating over there. We're going to have our meeting over there, take a field trip, learn a little bit about the 3rd Street Center. And if you want to come, that's going to be this coming Tuesday. Typically, we have meetings the last Tuesday of the month in the ranch house. So we've had a great group of people. We would love to include more people in the community every Tuesday, last of the month. That's it. It's fun. Okay.
We're going to start doing some of the wrap up at this point. But I want to bring up one specific thing. In the June board meeting, Sherry Stripling, who just rotated off the board, brought up an issue that we have talked about on a number of occasions at different board meetings and even some kind of strategy sessions. And that's the issue of term limits. And about half not-for-profits in the US have some form of term limits for board members. And I don't think any of the board members are opposed to that, but we just didn't really know what the best path forward was. And so we decided we would just bring, first of all, to the community, not another questionnaire or anything like that, but how about a straw poll at the annual meeting? Seemed like a good idea. So what I'm going to do is ask everybody, just not yet, to raise their hands if you think that term limits would be a good idea. And then we'll investigate, what would be the structure, how long a term, et cetera, et cetera. The only thing I would point out is if you're willing to vote for term limits, and I don't necessarily feel anything bad about that, are you also willing to run for the board? Because that's the question. If the answer to the second question is no, then I would ask you to think carefully about the first question. We had a good run this last one, and we had a number of candidates, which was great. I think that we were super lucky to get John and Laura, but also the other 3 candidates that put their hats in the ring are great people. And I'm pretty confident that at least some of them will be on the board someday and make fantastic contributions. So think about that a little bit and just show of hands. How many people in the room think that term limits for board members are a good idea? Yeah. So maybe not quite half, but enough that maybe we should continue the conversation and perhaps include some information in the newsletter, or anybody who wants to come to a board meeting and provide some public comment. We'll try to keep that as an agenda item so it would be open for additional ideas, and we'll look into it. That's the end of that part of the agenda. So we're going to get to the Q&A. We'll try to fit all the questions in. Hugh has the first question because he had his hand up first. There's a microphone there, but the room is small enough, so if you project well, you can say it. And if I can't answer it, I'll hand the microphone off to whoever can. And this is your chance to say and ask what you want, because really you own all the stuff we just talked about. You?
So Mike, when you talked about the reconstituting this organization to take the 0.25% real estate transfer tax, you alluded to but didn't confirm that that's going to be a pass-through organization to fund AVLT.
Correct.
Is that correct? All I want is confirmation.
Yes, that's right. I can't tell, because that would need its own board. That board would be RVR homeowners. You know, it doesn't have to be too many, but the construct of that board is very specific in our documents. And they would be in charge, but the mission in our documents and the mission of AVLT are congruent. So I would expect there'd be no reason not to, unless there was some reason that it didn't work out. It's not like this organization can come up with some new plan to spend money in ways that AVLT is not already investigating, because they have the same mission.
So yeah, probably.
I can't speak for them,
I understand.
and I don't think that I would be on the board, but that'd be their job. Yes, Nancy.
Any access to the gym facilities during all the construction, or is it all closed all school year?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that. I don't, does everybody hear me?
Yeah.
The question was whether or not the gym would be shut down over the renovation. And the answer is that we don't expect the gym to be shut down. I mean, we don't expect it. There's always the chance, right? The town of Carbondale could say, you know, your building can't be open because X, Y, and Z is happening. But we're not planning for that, and we don't project that. So, and that is not a portion, or it's not within the scope. One reason that we're hoping to accomplish the East Wing addition in phase 1 is so that in phase 2, when we renovate the locker rooms, we'll still have some bathroom and some limited locker room facility, you know, open for that phase, you know, because the idea, of course, is to keep all of that open as much as possible. Great question.
And what about the lap pools?
So the lap pools are, I mean, the honest answer to that question is that the lap pool is probably, you know, of all the areas within phase 1, that is probably the one that is the most up in the air, I'd say. You know, there is always the chance that if we couldn't get the rec pool accomplished, or if there was hardship or issues for whatever, maybe bad weather, right? Because we're talking about pouring concrete. We do have that audible, right, that we could run. We could say, okay, from the hot tubs over to the lap lanes, we're just going to move that to phase 2, you know, because we can't get all of this work done. So I would work with Jason, I think, through that phase. The goal would be to keep, we understand, in my view, that, I mean, the hot tubs and the lap lanes, they're always important. I know swimmers, you know, and how much they love our lap lanes, right? So I'm sure every season to them is important, but winter season is obviously really, really important for hot tubs and for a lot of the lap lane users. So the mission is to close it down for the smallest amount of time possible. That said, like, you know, it's a big job, right? The whole pool deck's going to be completely jackhammered up, you know, all that coping, all of that plastering of all those bodies of water. So it's not a one-day affair to get that done, but we're going to do our darndest to close it, to limit that closure as much as possible. And that's the best answer I can give.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Oh,
How is our assessment invested and our capital funds invested in the rate of return?
So our capital funds are invested pretty aggressively insofar as we can invest aggressively. It's all in Bitcoin at the moment. So. We do have an investment policy that we're obliged to follow, right? And that ultimately limits us to CDs. But as CD rates started to go up with inflation, I mean, we were all over that. So, you know, I can say, I mean, we review it regularly also with Edward Jones. And we make sure that we're investing every scrap of money that we possibly can. $100,000 roughly this year, probably, in interest income. Yeah. Well, 100,000 because we had to pay taxes on the 130 or 140, right? So we do have to pay taxes on the gain. So, but yeah, it's, you know, we're making a good return. We're making the best darn return we can. And we look at those rates regularly. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Last year I recall saying that the pool deck and the roof were coming out of the capital budget reserve. Is that still true?
Yeah, so I mean, in a sense, it's all reserves, right? Because I mean, you paid the special assessment, it goes into the reserve fund, but we are tracking, you know, from an accounting perspective, the special assessment side versus the reserve side.
That's
So
what I
we
was
do-
wondering.
We talk about those separately, right? Because we took 3,047,000 through that special assessment. And, you know, the long range planning committee tried to be as upfront as possible as to what those funds were funding. So we're doing our darndest to account for it separately, but it is all within one large reserve fund.
But there won't be any shortfall for the roof and the pool deck
There
because
won't-
you have the money there.
Yeah, we have enough money.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was largely what that bar graph that I showed kind of illustrated, right? We do have enough money to accomplish the renovations and then still to hold enough inside of our reserves to, you know, I'd be at pretty low risk of a special assessment. Yes.
I thought at one point there was some discussion about redoing the exercise area and new equipment, and did that get lost? What happened to that?
So that's a great question. There's a lot of talk. I mean, this whole initiative goes so far back, right? I mean, there's so many people that I could give credit to. I'll give a lot of credit to John Lund. I don't know where John went, but he's around there. To John Lund for being the chair of the Long Range Planning Committee. So, you know, all of this goes way, way back. And there was a time when that was discussed and that was on the table. But you know, the plan did evolve for for a great number of reasons, but I think it was largely for monetary reasons. The first price tag for the first dream stage that we came up with under long range planning, you know, gave shell shock and then, you know, a lot of head scratching and where do we go from here? So it did get eliminated from that plan. There's a possibility that in the future we could still accomplish that. We do have some money in reserves for new fitness equipment. I mean, it's not a ton of money, you know, it's $30,000 every 3 years, I think. I'm getting that right. Yeah, like 30 grand every 3 years, which is enough for, you know, to cycle through that equipment and kind of replace that equipment. But certainly there's a chance in the future. And I think it's, you know, this is a question for the future. And like I alluded to the fact that the board ultimately controls the reserve funding, right? Way off into the future, you know? So at some point, we're going to have to ask ourselves, how funded do we want to be, right? There's a percent funded that was also on that chart. I don't want to get too deep into it, but, you know, an association could be 100% funded. Most associations don't want to be 100% funded. It would be like keeping, you know, $1 million in your checking account, right? You just, you know, at some point you'd be like, well, I don't need that much money. Not that I don't have $1 million in my checking account. But regardless, I think you see where I'm going. Like the board can make that decision. You know, if we want to hold enough money so that we could afford a, you know, renovation such as that to convert the boardroom as an example, which is what was discussed, the idea of converting the boardroom into exercise space on that second level for usage. Well, in the future, I think it would be you know, we'd have to decide how we want to use the reserve funds. You know,
I would say that's a community decision.
yeah.
I mean, when
Yeah.
you look at everything that got done,
Yeah.
everybody had input in this and lots of voting and questionnaires and stuff like that. I mean, there's not a lot of board members that use a lot of the facilities. In fact, most of the facilities are used by a small group and it's a lot of the young families that are using those pools and things like that. But, you know, part of our obligation is to share our resources communally so that the people who can make best use of those get a chance to do so.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that, Mike. Absolutely. It's a community decision, you know, so, you know, if there's a consensus amongst the community, then you know, certainly that we might move in that direction.
Bob?
What's the status of the golf course? Is it still for sale or are they still trying to develop the driving range?
How long would take the golf course question? I was just about to lose my bet. Ben's been very involved in this, so I'm gonna let him do some chatting about that.
So yeah, the golf course, always hot topic. I've given a couple presentations on this in years past. The owner of the golf course, Crystal Outdoors LLC, I forget the name of the LLC's name. They have had it listed for some time. It has been relisted with a new broker now, and the price has gone up. It's 25 million, I think is what it's listed for now. And there's been renewed interest in it. But you know, the golf course hasn't changed. There's been no entitlements granted by the town of Carbondale. It still is a golf course and probably will be a golf course unless we have something different to say about that as a group. Anything else? Did that answer your question? Well, sorry, what was the question? Yeah, I would say the developer, the owner, has, you know, largely abandoned those plans in favor of trying to sell it. I think the interest in the golf course for potential purchasers is livened up by the possibility of development, which is currently what's sort of being marketed. But, you know, well, I say that, but and I got to be careful with what I say about that, I guess, but I've given presentations in years past on how that golf course could be developed. And the simple fact is you cannot change that golf course. You cannot change that driving range. You can't even get an application into PUZ to do any P&Z to do any of that unless 50% of all the owners within RVR say yes. That ain't happening. So does that answer your question? Does the golf course make any money? I couldn't answer that question, I think, ethically, but the golf course is doing great, and I think we all should continue, which I say every single year, give Steve Van Dyke and his team a huge round of applause because they do an awesome job. And they're still around, and let's hope they stay around.
Now we got the golf course out of the way. Carrie.
If I missed it when Sarah asked, when Sarah asked about the lap pool, but do you have any idea, is it going to be closed for 1 month or 2 months or 3 months or anything like that?
Yeah, I think that the quickest way to answer that is that it's going to be closed for the least amount of time possible. So
Yes.
yeah, but I, you know, it is, you know, I think what I essentially the highlight of what I said, I think, is that it's planned for phase one. But you know, that could very well, if we saw a big issue and we thought that it was going to be closed for a long time, that could very well move to phase two if it could, you know, close it for a smaller amount of time. So, you know, I think we have some options with the lap lane. At the end of the day, it's got to get done sooner or later, you know, so we're going to try to close it for the least amount of time possible. But we don't want to get into a situation where it's just sitting there all winter long, you know, not being used. So it's a priority for us to try to keep it open, Carrie.
And I don't want to jinx us, but I'll point out that, you know, Ashley's talking about getting this done in under a year on budget pretty well. You look at the town of Carbondale and it's probably going to take them about 3 years and they're far over budget. I mean, the recent estimates are like $15 million for their. That's your money too, by the way. So I think our management team has done a pretty good job so far handling it. But I'll point out, no shovels have hit the ground. I do not want to jinx us. It's very early. Yeah, so that's that. Who else might have a question?
Just a simple question, sorry. You said, will the whole ranch house be closed for a year, or is it just phases? Like, could you clarify for me, like when these things start, what's going to be closed and what's going to be open?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, phase one, is ultimately what you see up here in green, right? So yeah, we're not planning to close the whole ranch house for that. Most of it's outside. So the interior of the ranch house should be open through phase one. Yeah. Well, the mailroom would be in transition, and the temporary plan for the mailroom at the moment, we still have some logistics to work through with the post office, which has been challenging to talk to anyone at the post office. But the interim or the temporary, at some point you're going to lose your mailbox and you're going to have it somewhere. So we do have a trailer that is planned that will be heated. And we have, we're working on placement for that trailer to try to make that as seamless and as easy as possible. It's great.
Anybody else? Thanks.
Yeah, I just want to say, yeah, you guys have just worked, there's so many details, and we don't have to go and understand them. But the details, the depth of what you've had to do, the breadth, the depth, the everything. Awesome.
He's thanking Ashley for the depth of his work and the details involved in the process.
Thank you. And I really do. I humbly appreciate that. But there are also so many other people that I would throw into that, right? I mean, too many names to speak out loud, but a lot of people have really helped, to get us as far as we've gotten. So, big thanks to everybody. Ari Nelson and Carl and Mark Margulies has been a huge help. I mean, so many people have helped. If I keep giving names, then I'll just be remiss because I'll miss somebody, but lots of people have helped. Thank you, though.
All right. I'll see you guys around.